So introducing, this is the first time anyone's really seen
first time exclusive.
new in walls.
Check this out, man.
So the S5t had come into play. So pretty much the world doesn't know about these yet, so you do
Another
now.
first, guys.
So, you know, we want to equate that you can get loud and have sound quality, but we're not going to sacrifice one or the other. You can have both.
That you're not just interested in making things that look beautiful, not just interested in things that make, you know, just a lot of output, but really you're looking at engineering, you're looking at the actual acoustic properties of it, and you want to make sure that it meets your standards, and having those high standards, I think, is what it has greatly contributed to you being the very first speaker company that has reached that Dominus certification, and that's pretty incredible.
Because that's the starting sonic signature. So once we fell in love with the sound, we started with the S7 Tower. Once we hit what we wanted,
sure,
the idea was to make each one as close to that as possible with the normal limitations of bandwidth, you know, output, sensitivity, things like that.
Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Youthman. Today, we have got an incredible video in store for you. We're up here in Verona, Wisconsin. I'm here with my new friends. We've got Eric and Dan. We're gonna share with you the story of Perlisten. We're gonna look at some incredible speakers and subwoofers. We're also gonna talk a lot about the engineering that went into this series and even a lot of the certification aspect of it. So we've got a lot to cover. So we're gonna just go ahead and jump right into the video. So Dan, thanks so much for inviting me up here to Perlisten headquarters. I'd love for you to just kind of share maybe your role here at Perlisten, as well as some of the story behind the Perlisten brand.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for coming from Tampa. I know it's warm and sunny there, and it's
for sure
-9 today here in Verona, but it's a great place in the summer, and this is home to us. This is corporate headquarters. This is research and development. We do the main acoustical designs here. Eric and I focus on the speakers, the driver development, all the acoustical simulations, the crossover work, and of course the bulk of the measurements. So that's all done in this facility, inside and out. In the winter, it's 100% inside. In the summer, we do take advantage of northern Wisconsin and you know, use the outdoor ground planes and things like that. So, you know, that's why we're here. It's also where I grew up, and it's part of the DNA of Perlisten. My role, I'm the CEO of Perlisten. Really, my biggest contribution to the company was finding all the people to put together. Really talented engineers, really talented manufacturing, marketing, and sales. Once you have a team like that,
sure,
that's when you have a brand, and that's why I'm so excited about Perlisten, and that's why we're here to talk about why we're excited and what we've done and what we're planning to do. Where we're standing right now, right here, is our first listening room in our new facility. We've only been in this facility for about a year, which is the same age as Perlisten, December 21st, 2020, so just over a year ago. And in that time, we've developed some of the products that you're seeing here, and this is the room we use now for the bulk of our final listening tests.
Sure.
We have a couple other places we do. I've got a home theater at my house. It's a 2-channel / theater. Eric has a theater at his place, and then we have at our facility in China where we also do some listening. But specifically today we have S Series, which is the middle of the line, middle of the S line. So this is the S5m, which we call a monitor speaker. Which has great versatility. In the case here, where you can use it in the vented alignment, you can use it as a 2-channel, full range, kind of intimate stereo system.
Sure.
Or you can add the subwoofers. We just finished these literally last week. This is our entry-level subwoofer that really excited about it. It's a push-pull. It involves all the push-pull design criteria that we have in our flagship. It's just a lower power, lower SPL, much smaller package. Combining those two subs, we're actually using 2 of them. With the S5m, you end up with a really neat audiophile grade 2.2, if you will, listening session. Standing next to S5m, that's our monitor speaker. That's part of our S Series line. S Series currently is our top level series. all the S-Series products share common technology. It's what we've kind of started calling Project S within the Perlisten team, and that's really encompasses all the studying, the research, the years of experience that brought us to the point of S-Series products. The Perlisten team, we're made up of mainly engineers, audiophiles. You know, we just love acoustics, and that's why we're here developing products. So we like to apply those crazy ideas into our products. Featured in here is the DPC Array. That's the heart of all the S-Series speakers.
So what is DCP Array for those of us who
DPC?
don't
Yeah,
know?
that's good acronym. It's quick to say, directivity pattern control, and that's really a hallmark of what we're trying to do in the product. We're trying to control the dispersion into the room, how it interacts in the room. We're focused on a narrower, but not laser beam narrow, just a narrower vertical. So we're eliminating some of the ceiling and some of the floor bounces, which can be distracting and take away from imaging and detail and things like that. But also a wide but controlled, even dispersion in the horizontal. And what that does is it allows the speaker to interact and use the room to give that warmth, that much needed warmth, which is part of the experience. It's super important in fidelity. That's also how you create, depth of field, focus on the imaging, things like that. There's just a whole lot of detail in what we spent on developing the DPC Array. You know, we went through ideas like single tweeter with radical waveguides or horns, however you want to call it. We looked at and researched for I don't know how many months, probably 6 months, using two domes, two identical beryllium domes, and we really couldn't achieve what we wanted acoustically. So what came out of that research was kind of the crazy, or the radical is the term I used before, was adding the two mid-ranges along with the central tweeter, the beryllium tweeter, and then adding a waveguide. So it's kind of adding the best of everything that we've been able to do acoustically. So a waveguide and a tweeter, what does that give you? That gives you the advantages of, like I said, controlling horizontal and vertical. And you get some sensitivity increase, so you can use that to increase your power handling and lower your distortion. So right there, you already have a step above a lot of the different products out there that don't have waveguides. Then by adding the two mid-ranges with that, so now we're using 3 drivers together and a waveguide at the lower end of the DPC array, which is approximately 1100 hertz. Now you have those 3 transducers, so now they have the added sensitivity, thermal compression goes through the basement, power handling is increased, and of course now you're sharing that so you can do certain things in the crossover to create that vertical dispersion. So where the waveguide stops working, the crossover takes over, and we've started calling it beam forming, where you're controlling where the acoustic beam is, in this case, where it's going. So that's kind of the magic, if you will, we like to say, behind the DPC array. But that's also the heart of all the S-Series products, is that technology. There's certain things in the vocals that come out from that. We're using 3 domes where most people are using a mid-range, even if it's like a small 4-inch or 5 1/4 inch mid-range, it's gonna weigh somewhere in the order of 10 to 20 grams. Total moving mass on all 3 of these together is less than half a gram. There's a lot of interesting things that come out in the detail, the microsonics, or micro detail I like to call it, just how the vocals are represented. I guess I could go on and on and on about the DPC array, but maybe I shouldn't. But that is the heart of the product. As you grow out into the mid-woofers, we're expanding the beam forming, so we're using the woofer's placement physically, the amplitude, and then the phase within the crossover to also to continue that narrow vertical, wide horizontal. So if you look in our tech sheets, you can see each one. We show the polar pattern, we'll show it in the horizontal and the vertical, because they're both important, and you can see how we're looking at it slightly differently. And as you expand within the S-Series, Now, if we add more drivers, how far down in frequency we do the beamforming and control the dispersion increases. So an S7 tower, which is a bigger version of this, floor standard, it'll have more control. So it has, you know, it's the beamforming to the highest level. Anyway, so that's the monitor in a nutshell. That's the key acoustical attributes about it. The S Series as a whole, we use the same technology to keep the timbre matching. So when you build a theater, for example, it's important to have all the speakers have real similar sound quality, sound signatures, I like to say it, by using the DPC Array, similar drivers, and using similar design criteria, you achieve that.
So Dan, you mentioned timbre matching. Now timbre matching, or some people say timbre or timbre, timbre matching, typically in a brand, you're going to take the same identical speakers, maybe a left, center, and a right. You're going to use the same materials for the mid-range, same material for the tweeter. But my understanding, you've got a little bit more in-depth going on with timbre matching with Perlisten.
Yep, absolutely, and I'm not sure how it's pronounced either. I think I use it both ways, and
Sure.
I don't know which is correct. But everybody understands the concept that ideally you're starting with a 2-channel system, and you may fall in love with the speaker and how it sounds. And if you're building into a theater, or
Right.
if you have a multi-purpose room where you're doing 2-channel and theater in the same room, when you build into that theater, you know, if you're truly seeking high-end, highest quality sound, yeah, timbre matching is a big part of that. And yes, the driver components is certainly the starting point. But if you think about it, what makes the product sound the way it does, it's not just the drivers, but it's how the crossover is designed and how the directivity pattern is something I'll touch on a lot as we talk about our speakers, but how the room is being propagated into how the sound is being propagated into the room.
Gotcha.
That's so important. So yes, starting with the DPC Array, and putting that in every product in the theater, that's your starting point.
Sure.
And then using the beamforming. So now we're talking about how we're using the crossover, how we're controlling the integration between all the different drivers, and then how it's forming the horizontal and vertical. So if you look, again, I'll refer to the website. If you look at our spec sheets, we were showing the polar patterns, vertical and horizontal. There's a really interesting similarity from product to product. You can look at the polar patterns and
Gotcha.
if you look at the CTA 2034 data, they're going to be very similar because that's the starting sonic signature. So once we fell in love with the sound, we started with the S7 tower. Once we hit what we wanted,
Sure.
The idea was to make each one as close to that as possible with the normal limitations of
Right.
bandwidth, you know, output, sensitivity, things like that. But again, now you're going to put this speaker, let's say you use this in a larger theater as a surround with an
Sure.
S7 tower, going to sound very similar. It'll be a pretty good.
I'm thinking,
performing
man,
system.
that would be incredible. Because these can be, like in this setup here, these are your main speakers,
Absolutely.
you know? But these can also be some beefy surrounds as well.
Right, and so this is kind of the most versatile speaker in the line. So it has a lot of the attributes of the tower. It can be used as we have it now. We have it in a vented alignment, so you can see. You can't probably see from the camera right now,
Sure.
but we have a down firing
here.
vent. Yeah, and that allows it to play. In this room, it measures well below 30 hertz. It's 25, 28 hertz, somewhere in there is the cutoff. So you could easily use that as a satisfying 2-channel system. But of course, you could add a subwoofer to get the extra tactile feeling that you want, or in the theater application where there is a lot of subsonics and things like that, the subwoofers can really aid. But then, you know, going to the versatility of the monitor, you can use this as a surround in like a THX Dominus theater. If you truly were going for the ultimate,
Right.
that would be just a great system, right?
Yeah, for sure. And you could use this like as an LCR, like behind maybe an acoustic transparent screen.
Yes,
Would that work good for that?
That's a great suggestion, and I know a lot of people are a fan of using the same 3 in the front.
Sure.
And this is a great speaker for that because now it doesn't have the fixed bass. You can adjust it. So if you have a platform,
Sure.
or if you're flying it on the wall, however
Right.
you want to do it, there's just a lot more versatility, right?
Now you mentioned flying on the wall. When I was looking behind here,
Yeah.
I see there's like 4 holes here. Tell us a little bit about that.
So again, we wanted this speaker in particular, but we also have a bookshelf and we also have a on-wall.
Okay.
And all three of those have the same
Like
inserts.
pattern back there?
Yeah, exactly. And we have a tilt swivel bracket. So then you can put it on the wall and you can aim it however you need to.
Gotcha.
This being the largest one of it. So obviously you need to hook it to a stud to make it work right. It's not going to go through
How much
drywall
do they weigh
anchors.
roughly?
Goodness, I think this one's about 50 pounds.
50 pounds, yeah.
Yeah.
So definitely, guys, please have a professional install those, or make sure you get them into some studs. But definitely, so you can mount those, and man, my goodness, I could not imagine that. All right, Dan, you mentioned one of my favorite parts of a home theater, and that's subwoofers, because subwoofers provide that really tactile feeling when you've got those big action-packed movies, or even just during a musical score, just something that really pulls you into the movie. So I see we've got 2 subwoofers on the outside. Let's talk about those first.
Sure. Okay, so actually, you are probably going to be the first person in the world to hear these subs. These just finished this week. So you're lucky. This was just good timing, quite honestly.
Perfect.
We just got done with the design last week, and we're launching them first quarter this year.
Nice. So what are these?
These
What
are
model?
called the R210s. They are push-pull. It's based on 210s, obviously,
Sure.
with the name, and 1.3 kilowatt amplifier. It's a variant on the amplifier we use on the D series that we already have right now, scaled back a little bit.
Gotcha.
Very similar technologies. We use the push-pull, which not everybody knows about, but
Yeah,
basically...
that's kind of new for me.
Yeah. So I'm a huge fan of the push-pull, mainly because of all the benefits that it brings to the table. When you use the 2 drivers in that configuration, there's a natural cancellation of even order harmonic distortion.
Okay.
Lower distortion means better sound quality, ability to play louder with less stress. Those are hallmarks of what I find in a great subwoofer. Also, having those 2 drivers in that push-pull arrangement in a sealed box, now we're controlling the transient response, the group delay, just how that product sounds, how musical it can be. And I'm a huge fan of a subwoofer that can integrate with the speakers without showing that it's there. So obviously we can't do it on the camera here, but when you're listening in this room, you don't know if the sub's coming from here,
Nice.
or the 2 on the side, or if it's 100% from the speakers here. And that to me is how audio should be. You should be able to get that integration where the tactile, the bass is truly coming from the subwoofer. The harmonics are actually coming from the satellite speaker. And when you get a great transition between the two, that's
That's
audio.
like magic right there.
Yeah, right. Exactly. That's the goal.
I think one thing that you mentioned that I've always shared with my audience is that, to me, and this is just my thought, the only time you should really notice your subwoofers is when you turn them off. And the reason why I say that is they should blend in seamlessly with the organics of, the main towers or your center channel. And so you don't necessarily want something that's just going to blow you out of the room. But I got to ask, what the heck is this right here?
All right. So
Because this is my kind of style. So these are cute, and I
Right.
know that they
Yeah.
probably sound beautiful.
Right.
But tell me about this.
So this is the Sub 212V, which we spent the better part of last year developing. It is fully certified THX Dominus as a single sub. It uses the same drivers as the D212s, has all the same feature set. It has a interesting slot port, very long, tuned at about 15 hertz.
So this is like a kind of like a channel of where the sub frequency will
Yep.
travel. And what's the purpose of that?
Well, in order to get it tuned as low as we want and take advantage of the vent
Gotcha.
and boost the lowest octaves, that's why we tune it so low. However, this particular guy, I know it looks great. It's great furniture,
beautiful.
right? It didn't pass our sonic quality criteria. Obviously we do vented alignment. There's nothing wrong with the vented alignment, but in my opinion, it has to be done right. So when we're doing it in our speakers, like an S7 tower, we were able to get the tuning right. The port area to the tuning frequency and the size of the drivers is all good, so you don't have any chuffing. Also, the group delays are very similar, and transient response is very, very similar to a sealed box. That's why it works so well in the S7 tower. However, in this case, where the benchmark is a D215s push-pull sealed, absolute beautiful sound quality, this didn't quite meet it. So it's basically gone back into the research phase where we've challenged ourselves to figure out how to get this vented alignment, take advantage of the extra output from the vent for guys like you that want the higher SPL in a single box, but also make it Perlisten sound quality. It's a pretty high bar, and we're not there yet. So, right now it's just a piece of furniture.
I think that's something that I've seen in all of our conversations so far is that you're not just interested in making things that look beautiful, not just interested in things that make, just a lot of output, but really you're looking at engineering, you're looking at the actual acoustic properties of it, and you want to make sure that it meets your standards. And having those high standards, I think, is what it has greatly contributed to you being the very first speaker company that has reached that Dominus certification, and that's pretty incredible. But just as a side note, if this is just going to be furniture and you don't need it, I think I could fit this in my carry-on luggage on the airport.
All right, we'll get it in your suitcase and we'll send it home with you.
I like that. All right, so I've come to resolve that this is not going home with me, and you guys can't buy it, but what do you sell? Kind of walk us through maybe the other subwoofer models and the different variants of those.
Okay, sure. So, so we push the R210s next to the Giant, so you get an idea of scale.
Yeah.
So dual 10, this is our entry-level sub, and then we basically scale up from this. We have its bigger brother, the 212s, which is same amplifier, 12 inches, a little bit bigger.
Same push-pull?
Same push-pull design. So then within the push-pulls, we have, in R Series, we have a dual 10 and a dual 12. In the D Series, we have a dual 12 and a dual 15.
Nice.
The dual 15 is pushing that size, and honestly is capable of higher output, but it falls in that category of the push-pull, the seal, the musical sub that we love so much. And really, the idea that I'm trying to get across is that we're scaling SPL and nothing else. We're not scaling down sound quality, and that's so when someone buys a Perlisten subwoofer to work with Perlisten speakers, we've done the work to get it to integrate the best with the speaker.
Sure.
And then if your taste, room size, budget, whatever requires you to get more SPL or more subwoofer, you can scale and you can be confident that you can add more subs, which obviously has advantages in the room.
Better seat to seat.
Exactly. So here we were using 2 of the R210s, which is a great 2.2, if you will, setup where you can use the advantages of the 2 subs. You improve the dynamic range. This is an absolutely huge listening room. We've got 24-foot ceilings here, and it's about it's actually 30 feet long. So to fill that with subwoofer, it takes quite a bit. But when you get a chance to hear them, and you will before you leave, you'll be blown away how much these little 10s can actually do. So anyway, that's the core of the push-pull designs. We actually have 2 subs within the D series that are built on the same drivers, all the technologies we have, the same amplifiers, but they're actually just single woofers sealed enclosures. So the only attribute missing is the push-pull, but everything else is there. And did I talk about our amplifiers at all?
No, I mean, we talked about it a little bit, but not the technology that went in them, what's so important about those, and but definitely walk us through that.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's kind of like the DPC Array in the speakers. We spent a lot of time not only on the transducers, which we design in-house, ground up. We spent a lot of time on the amplifier design, starting with a touchscreen display where we took all the controls and put it on the top of the subwoofer. Now you can walk up the sub and make basic adjustments, setup, but it also integrates with an app where we have full PQ capability. You control up to 8 subwoofers together and really create a mesh of subwoofers, if you will. But then when you talk about the amplifiers, we have on our D series, we have up to 3 kilowatt amplifier. So that's just power. But really what makes our amplifiers different, it's not necessarily the power. There's a lot of high power amplifiers out there. It's the intelligence that we bake into it. So it's those years of experience tuning subwoofers to work in the musical and in the theater situation where we have what I like to call advanced limiters, where we're looking at bandwidth, we're looking at the timing of the limiters and how they're actually reshaping the waveform to not present themselves as audible. And that in and of itself was probably the culmination of 2-3 years of work. Then on top of that, we bake in profiles for thermal characteristics.
Okay.
So as the driver heats up, as the power supply heats up, as the amplifier itself heats up, there's actually a computer on board that's monitoring all that, and the profiles we have actually adapt.
Wow.
So, for example, if you're sitting in the sunlight like we are today,
Yeah, definitely.
if everything starts heating up and the amplifier is getting to a thermal level that might trip it, where most amplifiers would go, okay, I'm packing my bags, I'm just going to turn off.
Shut down, yeah.
Ours will actually lower the output threshold in small partial dB increments until it thermally stabilizes again, and then it'll let it come back up. AC line, we know AC line can vary from house to house, room to room, day to day, but even while you're listening, the subwoofer is watching the AC line, and it's monitoring that, and then it's adjusting the limiters. Why? Sound quality. If suddenly I don't have as much voltage on the AC line, the amp's going to clip sooner. So if the engineer tuned it, the limiters, he did all this work for 2-3 years to make it sound perfect, and then the AC line changes, all that work is thrown away. So you just adapt to it. You lower the limiter threshold, it still has the same sound quality, just not as much SPL. But the reverse is true. If there's more AC available, we'll increase it and we'll take advantage of that, and we'll use the power output. There's a lot of interesting design things like that. We do all the amplifiers in-house. Our partner, Stephen Masenik, he's not here today, but he does the lion's share of that, really unique individual where he does both the electronic design and he does the software design. So he's kind of like two-sided, you know. Usually it's just one or the other that you do. And that's just the strength of Perlisten. We have a lot of engineers just like that can add technologies, add unique ideas, and come up with things that nobody else has done before.
So Dan, we've talked about the massive amount of technology that goes into both your speakers as well as your subwoofers, but can we just take a look at maybe what's inside that technology, like a really close-up look at what that looks like, so you guys at home can kind of see what really went into making these speakers and these subwoofers?
Actually, yeah, I'd love to show you that, but I think it would be a good time to bring in my partner, Eric Wiederholz. He does a lot of the acoustic simulations and the nuts and bolts that goes into these technologies. So it'd be a good time to get him and start talking about his part of the technology.
Cool. All right, Eric, I'm looking at this table with some really cool technology. Kind of walk us through what went into this and kind of how that's implemented into your speakers and subwoofers.
Yeah, it's great. So Dan has been talking here about, maybe that 15 to 10,000 foot level about our technology, how it comes together as a system, and what it all means. But all the things that are great about Perlisten and do make us different are really in the details behind it to enable those system, the power response, the transients, all those things that make us special.
Yeah.
And so those have to start first. You always have a target, but to get there is the details. So like when we look at a waveguide, me and Dan were looking at how do we reach the SPL needed for sensitivity, how do we do that and create great dynamics, and how we make that happen. And so we started playing around with a few ideas that Dan had. And the first thought was add another tweeter to get that sensitivity that we needed. But then you can have interactions and you have things that happen. And then we were just on the borderline of where we wanted to get to for sensitivity. And Dan said add a third tweeter. And I'm like, what?
So let's show these guys kind of what you're talking about here maybe.
And so when you do that, we always add complexity to a system. So we have to manage that very carefully. And so as we started developing, we went through 23 revisions in FEA. And so we modeled all of these differently in a lot of different configurations. Most of them didn't work, right? And you think about Edison or whatever, you found out 20 ways how not to make a light bulb, essentially. And so as we went through, we kept refining it. Dan had that system target of really what he knew. And he guided me in saying, hey, let's try this. We do the basically COMSOL analysis. And I would run 3 revisions overnight. They'll take 6 to 8 hours to run in complexity. And we just run simulation in the morning and have 3 different models on frequency response.
Okay,
And we're
so
like,
you can kind of see which one
we could see
gets the
what
best.
we were doing, what was best, and you know, every time you do something, you create a problem. Is it a solvable problem?
Okay.
And so we kind of look at all those frequency responses. What are the benefits? What are the drawbacks? Can we solve those? How are we going to use it in the system? And we got down to where we did 23 revs. We ended up back at 20. It ended up the best.
Okay.
And basically, it's the interaction of how are we using these drivers, and they're not overlapping all the time. Part of the bandwidth they are, and that's the beamforming. That's actually the true technology. In order to do beamforming, we have to have multiple drivers. We have to have time, phase, and amplitude changes in order to control that. And a lot of times that's done with DSP. So what's really cool about this technology is we did it passively.
Okay.
And so that was the art itself. And I need time delay, so we did that physically.
And that's
by having
because
physical
some
offsets.
speakers are more forward than the
they're more
others.
forward
Okay.
or flat. And so the technology of time, phase, and amplitude and how we integrated it was part of the design as well, and then waveguide shape. So we basically took 2 technologies and put them together, and that really hasn't been done before.
Gotcha.
A lot of people do beamforming,
Okay.
and they use DSP to do that, and then a lot of people use a waveguide.
And
But
the
they
DSP would be external,
and
but
those
you're
are
wanting to do this
external and
internal.
doing that. So we're doing all of that internal, and
Okay.
that's really what's really amazing about this technology. I think we grew even as we measured it, played with it, and learned from it. We learned how really cool it was afterwards. It kept growing and growing, and how much power we had enabled in our designs.
Right.
And that's why it fits in every design, why it fits in the S5m, why it fits in the S4B. There's so many tweaks and knobs to turn to give us what we need to achieve a power response that's so critical and the baseline of our technology.
So you talked about the technology that went into the beamforming
Yep.
in this array
Yep.
of speakers. See, I'm learning, as you can tell. I'm not as deep as you are, man. You understand this really, really, really.
We just make stuff up, don't even worry about it.
Hey, it sounds fancy, and I'm buying into it. But kind of tell me, you don't use DSP externally. You mentioned that you do it internally. Kind of explain, what do you need to make that happen?
Yeah, so a lot of things that I had mentioned before we need is time, amplitude, and phase, and those are all the kind of things that give us the tools to tune a response.
Yeah.
And so what also makes that possible is a crossover. And most people, what they'll use is, or you learn as a DIY kind of guy, I go to my book and there's these standard filters, and I use a 24 dB Linkwitz Riley here and a Butterworth here, and those match if I flip the phase of one mid and blah, 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 blah. None of that applies here.
Okay, so you had a different approach.
We
to
have a
this.
very different approach. The end approach is, what's my final response need to be? What's the power response need to be in the room? What's proper for that speaker design? So traditional filters, as we look in a textbook and our engineering book, are not used here. It's what's best for the overall system, power handling, sensitivity, off-axis response. And so that's what's really enabled by all the crossovers here. Is controlling that. And it does make a difference per design, per size and per application of what we're doing here. So it's over 400 measurements that we take, and you have to measure each individual driver and know its response and position in time and in the speaker. And then you're blending all those together in simulation to get a frequency response and saying, hey, is that my target? What's good? What's bad? Individual coils wrapped to our specifications, so that's quite often in the industry. Really tight tolerance on the caps. We can customize the values that we need specifically, and you really need tight control. So when you're doing something like this, that 2 to 3%, what you might get off the shelf of a value for a component really isn't good enough. We're matching to a half a dB.
Okay.
So that's critical. Any quarter of an ohm here or a few tenths of an ohm in a coil makes a difference. And they consume power.
Right.
And so when you're trying to be as sensitive as possible, so you can use that 30 watt triode or
Sure.
that tube amp, I mean, we've got enough power to be comfortable. We have customers who are using 30 watts and going, it's all I
love
need.
it.
I
That's
love
all-
it. You
yeah.
know,
I don't need
And-
7,000
yeah,
watts.
exactly. And
Gotcha.
what we do also enable, as part of that too, is the dynamic range.
Okay.
So you'll see it. People talk about how loud does it get.
Sure.
Not that critical. It's really about the dynamic range to achieve those peaks so they're not compressed. And
Gotcha.
that's what most people will realize is like, when you listen to an S7t, an S5m, whatever, you're like, there's stuff I never heard there. And one is, as we talked about, light mass.
Right.
So we can, have the transient response to react to those micro details, but also the dynamic range. And so there's those peaks that are in music, and if you chop them off,
Sure.
you're not reproducing the signal properly. And so all of those wind into what is power handling. Yes, we have a ton of power handling. You don't need that to get loud. You need that for dynamic range, and that's what's really cool, about the technology.
And these are massive too. I mean,
These
guys,
are massive.
Look at
Great components. These are custom twisted wires. So everything's made from the ground up. And
Techno Dad would be proud.
Yeah.
He loves some
Yep,
braided wires.
Absolutely. And that's even as we step back a little bit, we talked about the waveguide technology, but we forgot to talk about actually the drivers themselves are actually designed in-house.
Okay.
From ground up motor design. We learned how to do really high power handling. And there's just so much technology that are involved in these.
Eric, you touched on the driver technology. Can you walk us through maybe the other drivers that you've got, mid-range, subwoofers?
Yep.
Kind of tell us the technology that went into that.
Yep. So, as we talked about earlier, this is ground up. We designed the tweeters ourselves. We designed the mid-range woofers. Everything is ground up. Simulations. And a lot of people do some of that magnetic simulation and stuff like that, spider simulation. But really, we took it to another level, and even starting out with what we call mid-ranges, which are what everyone else would call tweeters.
Sure.
But they are technically being used as mid-ranges in our waveguide.
Right.
Beryllium in the center, obviously everyone pretty much in the world regards that as one of the prime materials.
Sure.
It's, great stiffness and it's super light and has all those kind of things. So when we touched upon the mid-ranges, one of the cool things that we really wanted to enable was a new technology that we co-developed with TechStream.
Okay.
Take a look, absolutely. So it's a carbon fiber technology, but they specifically take the material that is like traditional carbon fiber, and they spread them out in a weave in a flat layer. They call it a spread tow technology. So this is something that they developed. They're a company in Sweden. But what really is cool about that is not that we're using some cool new material. It actually has some really cool benefits. So we're going to talk about the features and benefits of this stuff. We believe in science and engineering. If you haven't caught on by that by now, we're not just slapping new materials and saying, "Hey, we're cool."
Gotcha.
There's more to that, and that's what we hope people think is great about Perlisten.
Sure.
But there's distributed modes and breakup, and we want a diaphragm to act like a piston. Means it moves in unison through all areas of the cone as we play sound. And when that doesn't happen, there's coloration. You notice that. And so what's really great about this distributed pattern is that it distributes all those breakup modes into a nice even pattern.
Okay.
And so quite often when something does break up, and especially like when it's really stiff, even like beryllium, you get to a point where it breaks up violently. And so in the frequency response will be these dramatic peaks and dips.
Sure.
And most audio engineers, we roll those off and they're out of the picture. But what you have to do is you have to roll those off steeply.
Gotcha.
Lots of components, big components. You're trying to negate it from being a problem.
Gotcha.
The great thing about this material is it distributes them all. I don't have to worry about that. So we worry about power response. I don't have to worry about limiting the driver.
Sure, gotcha.
And getting rid of all those peaks and dips. Are they 20 dB down when it's blending in with the mid-range so they're not interacting?
Right.
All those kind of problems go away. And it's tunable. So what's really cool is there's different layers and different angles, different directions. All in this. Yeah, so this is many layers. It's super light and it's
crazy.
super stiff. And so in our opinion, it's the second best material in the world, barring beryllium. And it probably in some ways has some benefits above beryllium, that especially in the mid-ranges, that we really appreciate in the driver design off-axis response.
So
and some
to
of the cool things.
To the average guy like me, I'm just looking at it as, man, that's a cool design. But to know that there's like so much tech that went into this.
Not even a cosmetic turn. You know,
Really?
that was
That's
100% science driven. It
Wow.
wasn't
That's cool.
cosmetically driven.
Yeah, and that's good to know because,
and,
again, as we're seeing in this whole series, is that this is all based on measurements and data, and
Yeah,
that's the
it's-
driving force behind, it seems like every decision that you make with Perlisten.
Yeah, absolutely. We're 100% driven that way. You know, Dan has always been that way. We've worked together now for 20 years. We've been in the industry together. We've been out of the industry together. But the one thing that has been solid, and he ingrained in me as a young engineer, he's the first person to hire me in the audio industry,
Right.
was that it's science. That's you got to base it on engineering.
Right.
And so that steps into, you know, we used it in the mid-ranges. You know, Moxie helps design the cones.
Yeah, man, she's did a great job.
She's one of our prime designers, and she keeps us calm. And we got two other dogs around here too, so
Yeah.
they keep us sane. But this drives right into our Woofer technology as well.
Yeah.
Super light. And lots of excursion.
Gotcha.
And not to be loud. Again, that is an end result.
Sure.
We get that
That's
on
not
the
the
side,
focus.
but that's not the focus.
Okay.
That focus is dynamic range, transients. If I have a lot of mass and I put a ton of power in there, the speaker doesn't stop when I want it to.
Right,
Inertia
sure.
carries it on. So lightness is just key. Sensitivity, so it makes it easier to be loud. And have high sensitivity with that dynamic range, which gives you the transient, the impact. And no one would say I listened to an S5m and I could feel impact in my chest. We do. You know, that is evident in even a monitor speaker. You know, and so those are the things that are enabled by doing that. Aluminum wire transits heat well and cools off quickly.
Okay.
Plus keeps it really, really light. And then also what a lot of people do in long excursion is that it's very, very low inductance. So there's no inductance modulation.
Okay.
And we saturate the motor so there's not a lot of flux modulation. So there's all these really cool things that we put into the driver design that are there to make it, you know, the end result, right? And that end result is truly, the technology is cool, we talk about it, we all get into it.
Sure.
But this melts away, right? It's why we called ourselves, you know, perceptual listening is something that we coined, because it's down to, this melts away. It's cool, but when you go home and you sit down, have a drink, you listen to the speaker, all the day's pain goes away, right? It's about just sitting and enjoying yourself and not worrying about those 40 emails still in your inbox.
Exactly.
Right? It's forget it, I don't care, I'll look at it in the morning. I just want to listen to great sound and what it enables. And so that's really what it's about.
All right, so now we're going to do some transition to woofers. Are you going to help us? You going to help us? So if we could bring that big monster subwoofer in here.
Yep.
So this is the 15?
Yep, this is the 15.
All
Yep.
right.
The dog does.
Right here.
Hey, Gus.
So tell us a little bit about the technology that goes into your subwoofers.
So we talked about the technology here, and it's the same thing, is that, you know, it's subwoofers, and everybody's like, they want long excursions, so
Sure.
they're trying to make it ends up being heavy for that characteristic.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Well, I'm talking about moving mass. You're talking about the weight,
I'm talking about the
right?
whole thing,
The
man.
whole thing, absolutely. And, you know, that's part of that weight is making it very efficient, so magnet.
Sure.
And so that's something that we do as well. But what's really important is exactly everything here is that it's not about how loud it is or how much bass we get.
Right.
It is really about transient response and low THT. So, you know, that enables from the amps right down to the speaker. And part of that is being light. So this is a really light driver comparatively if you looked at another 15-inch woofer.
Gotcha.
We use, again, the aluminum voice coil to reduce mass, but you get longer excursion by doing that. Thermal management, you know, all those things are really, really cool, and long excursion. So that long excursion, again, it does get really loud.
Right,
I
sure.
mean, it does get really loud. But it's about managing THD. Overall as a system, and Dan talked about limiters and stuff like that, is that at most of the bandwidth, we never even get beyond 2% distortion.
Okay.
At lower frequencies, we'd let it go just a little bit more to get people wanting a little louder. But I don't think there's any of our subs you can even get over 10% distortion.
Okay.
We don't allow it.
And that's that high standard.
That's
that
a
we've been
high
talking about.
standard we want to achieve. And you know, we talked about the vented model, and you know, that's something we'll probably go to back as a project. But you know, we want to equate that you can get loud and have sound quality, but we're not going to sacrifice one or the other. You can have both as well, and that's really really crucial into what Perlisten is.
So Dan, several times during our conversation, we've mentioned this thing called THX Dominus certification. And I'm looking at this wall of certification. Tell us a little bit about this.
Okay, so THX Dominus, which is their highest spec, it's the most difficult to achieve. Literally compared to THX Ultra, which most people are familiar with.
Sure.
It's a full 6 dB more output.
Okay.
So to pass all those criteria underneath and play 6 dB louder, you can imagine what it takes on the design side.
Sure.
And that's exactly what attracted us to doing THX Dominus certification. It was coming out with a new brand that was going to show measurements, was going to show the science behind our technology, and want people to understand what that means. To have a third party take your product in, they do over 300 measurements, they do listening evaluation, they've seen hundreds and hundreds of products over the years, and to be the only ones, to not only be the first in the world to have THX Dominus certification, to now have, I think we have 21 up here right now, all THX Dominus certified, and really that's telling people, well, we've taken the time in our designs to make them sound as good as they can, to put our technologies into it, but then take care of the details, the measurements, the distortions, the polar patterns, and that's what THX does really well. It embodies good audio engineering, not only on the speakers but on the electronics too, and the whole home theater.
So it's not just about more volume and getting louder or bigger rooms, but being able to hit those specs. And one thing that's kind of interesting, so we've got a certification. Is this for all of your speakers? Or?
Yeah, every speaker that we do so far, we've taken it through the THX certification.
And is that because you've started off with, okay, we're going to design a great speaker, and we're going to implement that same technology over and over again into all of our speakers, and man, it's working.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
100% true. Once you hit the technology, then it just fits within. Our philosophies align very similarly to what THX has in their spec, and so just by that, the very nature of the way we design speakers, they're gonna pass what the requirements are for THX.
Sure.
Yeah, and just so happens that we did this all in 1 year. Well, we got the certs in 1 year.
Oh my goodness.
That's a point of pride. That's why we call it the Wall of Fame right now. Obviously, we were working on this for several years prior.
Sure.
But we decided to launch all the models at the same time, so there was a full product, a full solution launch, and so that's why we had it on the wall, and we're really proud of it.
Definitely. So also we've got a couple of different models here too. So we looked at some in the main listening area over here, but I see we've got a couple of different models, a different subwoofer, a sealed subwoofer. Maybe not as fancy, if I could put it that way, as far as finish and style. So kind of tell us what makes this different. And I even see a really cool finish on the other side. Kind of let us know, can we get some different finishes besides what we've seen here with the I guess piano black gloss?
Yep, so we call this piano black, exactly. And so what we're looking at is the R5t. So this is one of the R series. And the reason behind the R series was immediate feedback that we got. Certainly had great response on how much people like the S
Sure.
Series products, but there are people that were requesting product at a lower price point. So the
Gotcha.
R Series is really a trickle-down technology where let's say, you know, if you throw a number at it, 85% of the sonic attributes of an
Sure.
S Series, you put into the R Series
Gotcha.
at half the price.
Right.
So, you know, similar model, half the price, 85% of the performance. So you start going up the value curve real quickly.
Sure.
But not quite as great an achievement as the S Series.
Right.
So the R5t, yep, piano black. We've also simplified it in that it's only available in the piano black or the piano white finish. We're
Okay.
not doing any exotic finishes.
Sure.
And all the technologies that Eric walked you through, they're very similar in approach, but we're using different materials. We're doing silk dome tweeters.
Okay.
Compared to beryllium and Techstream, that's, you know, orders of magnitude less expensive. We have a pulp cone that we developed.
Okay.
Again, similarly, great performance, not quite the level that you can achieve with Techstream. So
Sure.
we're trying to push it, but keeping the cost under control. The crossover isn't quite as out of control either, although we still use the high precision components because
Gotcha.
that's a criteria to do the beam forming and
Sure.
all the sonic attributes.
And to
So-
meet the THX
And to meet the-
certification,
yep.
Dominus. And so I guess what you're really saying is these are kind of like the Youthman deal version of Perlisten, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
definitely, man. So I love that you're even listening to your audience and saying, man, we can provide something that's a little bit more budget friendly, but still have some amazing performance. I love even the design that you've got even on the bass and the feet. I mean, man, and tell us about this little subwoofer here, man. This
Okay,
guy,
so that's the
so I'm gonna squat down just to give you perspective.
You bet. That's the smallest sub we make right now, although that's in the D series, so that uses 1.5 kilowatt of hemp.
Woofers and woofers, they
are
just
attracted.
go together.
This is hilarious.
Here, come here.
This is Sammy. This is the oldest of the
Sammy.
Perlisten team, and this is
They're gonna
Gus,
steal the show,
youngest.
apparently. Hi. Hi.
Yeah, this is good.
Yeah.
Anyway, the D12s is one of the two subs that we have that's not push-pull.
Gotcha.
It's sealed, uses the same driver.
Sure.
Uses the same
Same
one-
amplifier?
Same amplifier,
Okay.
same technologies in the amplifier. So the only trade-off is that you don't get the benefits of the push-pull, but the advantage is you have a smaller package. So this is great for a smaller room, like a 2.1 system,
Yeah.
or even in a theater. You know, and especially if you're thinking multiple subs, you can
Sure.
now
Put
place
multiple ones.
Yep.
And they don't take up the
Exactly.
the whole living room or
Exactly.
definitely.
And now it has dog hair on it, so
all-
it's good to go. All right, so here we have the S4B. This is in one of our special edition finishes, which incorporates the veneers, where we have a few veneers. This is the high gloss ebony, which actually
beautiful.
is very, very popular. You never really know when you have finishes that definitely look beautiful. You just don't know how many you'll actually buy because the piano black is always extremely popular. But in some cases, as much as a third of our sales go in the special edition finishes.
Gotcha.
We have the high gloss ebony that you see here. We also have a natural black cherry. We also have piano white,
Okay.
which we didn't show.
Sure.
And then we have a couple maple finishes as well.
Nice.
So there's a couple variations. The other unique feature, I think Eric might have showed it earlier, is the waveguide is actually CNC milled out of solid oak.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see the oak grain in here and
Right. And that's only available on the special edition.
nice.
So yeah, so that's now that we're finished talking about the finishes, bad dad joke, sorry, but want to show you what's behind this wall where we work on all the designs. We've got a couple cool things to show you.
All right, Eric, so what in the world do we have going on here?
So in the backside where all the engineering really happens is one, we need a giant space, really tall ceilings. There's 25-foot ceilings in here
Sure.
in the backside of the warehouse. So we can do inside measurements, good to about down to 40, no, not quite that low, but 50, 60 hertz.
Okay,
But we generally keep that down about 80 hertz for good resolution.
sure.
And so then we transition to near field measurements, which are near field mic and outdoor measurements for low frequency and subwoofers.
Right.
But generally a huge space. We fly our speakers up about midway between point and ceiling.
Okay, so when you say fly them, are you hanging them from the ceiling?
We're
or-
putting them on a giant pole that we can rotate and
Gotcha.
measure.
Okay.
It's custom and designed so that we can actually do really good measurements inside.
Okay.
And that's a huge advantage. Obviously, we just talked about it earlier. It's -8 last night.
Yes, very, very cold
Today
outside.
got pretty warm. I think we got up to 12 or 13.
Sure.
So obviously you got to develop through the winters, and that's something that we do and enable that.
Yeah.
And as long as you're doing good measurements, you understand what you're getting in the resolution, we can get great measurements inside. So that's really a huge advantage that not even some major manufacturers have the possibility to do.
Right.
Is measurements inside in a space like that.
Yeah.
So that's really great. What you see behind us is actually the other side. You saw a pretty
Yeah, that was all fancy
all
on
the
that
pretty THX posters are on this side.
Yeah.
The opposite side. But here is, you know, when you do in-walls, so introducing, this is the first time anyone's really seen
First time exclusive.
in-walls.
Check this out, man.
and that you got to have a good place to measure those as well.
Yeah.
And so realistically, you got to measure them in a wall because that's how they're going to be used.
Gotcha.
But also you need outside of that to get anechoic measurements, dual or power response, all the things that are, again, transitioned from an in-room speaker that are going to be, this is an S5t. I mean, essentially,
Right.
it doesn't have the huge box, so
Sure.
you're not going to go down to 23 hertz.
Sure. Your subwoofers are plenty
But
capable.
this is intended for a home theater, so subwoofer's taken over, that's mandated and how the product's going to be used. But other than that, that's an S5t in a
That's
wall.
awesome.
And so, you know, same thing, family, S7t, we call this I for in-wall, so S7i
Okay.
dash LR.
All right.
We have the C version, which basically rotates the waveguide.
All right.
So you could do that. A lot of people, especially with acoustically transparent screens,
Yeah.
are just going to use 3 LRs. So 1, 2, 3.
The good thing that I see with this too is, like, you know, my speakers are massively thick, so you could have your screen
Yep.
really close to your front wall, have a nice compact,
Yep.
have more seating spacing.
And
Man.
the great thing is too that, I mean, it's 4 inches thick. We kept it to that. Most custom home theaters, there's no restrictions.
Gotcha.
But in this case, that media room, which is still quite common.
Which is actually what I have in my house.
Right, I have a home theater, but it's a useful space. We still watch TV in here. We still have people here that are next to the kitchen. You know, that real life scenario
Gotcha.
where I want to use an in-wall, have that maximum performance without taking up my living space, and that's really important too. So exact same power response, same SPL capabilities, sensitivity, all the critical things that make an S7t grade are now in an S7i, LR, and C. Again, same thing, transitioning to the family as well and to a 5.
Okay.
I don't know if we actually talked about nomenclature, which actually brings up a great point, but 7i, 5i, S4i, S4b,
Thank
transition
you.
to the number of drivers.
Thank you, though,
1,
for
2,
making something
3,
that
4,
makes
5.
sense. Yeah.
7
Nice.
drivers, so that's where that nomenclature really came from.
Makes total sense.
Makes
Some
total
companies
sense.
don't do so well with that.
Engineers
so-
don't always make sense.
You're right. But we're grateful from a consumer's perspective when it does, especially when you're trying to figure out,
Yep.
like, what would work best in my
Yeah,
situation.
exactly. What's really great, and you'll see this in the custom install market as well too, is that there are some really strict requirements about home theater design, right? And that's noise isolation, ventilation can't be, you know, so loud, seat-to-seat variation.
Sure.
There's a million things that designers are juggling. And so one of the things that they don't also want to juggle is a back box. You know, sometimes they do, and it's an in-wall with no back.
Right.
And maybe I should show this
Yeah.
to you guys.
And we'll get some close-up
This is a
B-roll stuff of
prototype.
this.
It's not quite perfect, but
Yeah.
solid back box. It's solid aluminum. This weighs 52 pounds.
And he's putting it on an expensive speaker.
Yeah, well, prototypes.
This is the design
Prototypes.
side, man. This is the
So,
prototype.
well, and that's why, you
Yeah.
know, Dan and I don't ever pretend that we get a sample, because you move it, you pick it up, you unload it, you take out a driver.
Sure.
As you go through the design process, you're going to screw them up. So
Yeah, sure.
we don't pay too much attention. But
Yeah.
I mean, flagship prototype subwoofers, obviously. So that was the where all the design work for the D212s came from.
Cool.
And the D215s.
Oh, yeah. The big boy.
As you get that scale, I mean, it's pretty obvious that you can see that, you know, they get big.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of output and a lot of performance. It's about making it right. and getting the best performance out of it. And and a lot of people, your followers involved love, size really isn't key. It's about performance anyway.
Sure.
And so really no restrictions.
Yeah.
Best selling subwoofer we have, actually. Everybody wants a
And
flagship.
honestly, it's not really that big. I mean,
it's not ginormous.
It's a big subwoofer.
And actually, you'll think about when you get the output capabilities for that size, and then there's another level plus distortion, and you're like, there's some pretty crazy metrics in how good that is as an overall performing subwoofer. And just newly added S5c, so the 7 as a driver in a center channel gets big for some customers in the use case. So we did a 5 version of that.
Scaled down version, same technology.
Yep.
Same incredible performance.
Exactly. And we talked about timbre matching. All of these.
Right.
This is it. And so right down to our S4S, which hangs on a wall, they have to sound the same, and that's critical. And so that follows through the whole line again. So as we transition from some of the other products, and again, we talked about new products like the S7i, S4i, S5i, etc. We want to talk about a couple of new things too here. The R7t, which is coming very soon.
Nice.
They're on their way. And we'll be here in February.
Okay.
And again, R Series, we had the opposite request from the S Series of, hey, you have a 7 speaker model in the S Series, how about the R Series?
Gotcha.
And so a lot of people requested that. So there it is. And that's really the idea of how you prototype, right, is hairball.
So these are different configurations, or is that what's in this?
That's technically, all of that will get prettied up in a nice, pretty PCB, but, we're prototyping and soldering and, changing an inductor, and then you take a measurement.
That's so cool to do it on the outside. You can kind of do it
not
live.
You would never want to take it in and out all the time, and you're always playing with things, 10 or 12 times. And
you guys are going to be giving away all your secrets, these other designs.
But then there's a few hundred measurements, then tweak again. So that's where, again, simulation comes in so critical.
Nice.
Is that, we can simulate all of this.
And you can get a pretty good ballpark and then test it.
Not ballpark, you can nail
down
it.
to it, really.
You can down to, so that's why we do the individual measurements raw. So you're measuring every speaker individually at every mic position.
Makes sense.
So rotate mic, all the drivers individually.
Okay.
Rotate all the mics individually. You get this polar plot for every driver.
Okay.
Time and phase to the ear.
Wow.
So you got to individually measure all those. Then we import all that data into a CAD program. And then we have the acoustic response. Now we can take filters and do simulation after simulation, hundreds of revs, literally in a day or two. And then you can go, I think that's something I want to try, and go in and, go to the bins over here and
see all kinds of soldering
unwind or wind coils and make a mess and solder it all together, what looks like a total mess.
Yeah.
And then we'll take the on-axis response and say, yeah, that matches my simulation. Now I'm going to go through and continue on with the measurements. So then we'll do measurement 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You do a whole polar, vertical, and horizontal. And you get that data of saying, hey, did we meet our goal? Go take a listen. And and then that's something that we've done over and over again. Dan had started this a very long time ago, and I'd always incorporated it. I never really thought of it as special, as even as our careers divulged and now came back together again, was that individually listening to one speaker, we rarely listen in a pair, because that just, everything sounds pretty good in stereo.
Yeah.
Right? But if you want to find the nuances of that sounds weird, that vocal's weird, I hear some harmonic, I hear a resonation or something, something rattling, whatever. It's evident because there's no stereo, it's mono.
Right.
And so that's totally cool. I just thought it was normal. And then more as we've talked, they're like, no one else does that.
Yeah.
But it really alludes to, I'm hearing just the speaker and not getting that stereo image. You focus more on the problems.
Yeah.
And so R7t, also kind of a reverse development, was that everybody loved the 7t maybe wanted a speaker that was a little smaller, didn't need the extra
Sure.
output. So the S5t had come into play. So pretty much the world doesn't know about these yet, so you do
Another
now.
first, guys.
So that's
Thanks, seriously. I mean,
all
this
the
is
great same
exciting.
technology is just scaled, and I know Danny alluded to this earlier in our subwoofers.
Mm-hmm.
Is we stress the same bandwidth.
Yeah.
You're just scaling to SPL and loudness, and that's crucial. It's critical. And saying, I heard the S7t. Am I going to like the S5t?
Yeah.
Well, you should,
Absolutely.
because it's just a little less output,
Gotcha.
maybe the beamforming because a few less drivers, maybe not controlled directivity for quiet and low in frequency. But hey, it's gonna sound really good. And that's not always true with a lot of brand names. It's like, well, this was a different target,
Right,
a different
sure,
response,
different-
and
yeah.
used for a different reason. You're like, well, I love that speaker. I hate everything else. Or I really enjoyed that speaker, and I went and paid for a more expensive one, and I didn't like it. You get what you get. The technology isn't everything.
Well, you talked a lot about listening to these, and we have yet to do that. Unfortunately, due to copyright and plus just trying to capture what our ears can hear on these little microphones, it's just not possible. But I'm gonna hit a pause here. We're gonna go listen to
go
some,
listen.
and then let's sit down and have a conversation on what they sound like. How about that?
Sounds great.
All right, guys, we have just spent probably the last 45 minutes listening and demoing a 2.2 system. So these are the Monitor Series up front. Then we've got two, let's just say, kind of cute little 10s. And I say cute, and here's the reason. You know on my channel, I like bass. I initially went into this thinking, okay, these are gonna be, they'll sound decent, because we're in a massive room, guys. I mean, I'm looking up, we've got what, 30-foot ceilings?
25 foot, yeah.
25 foot. I mean, this is a massive room. This is not an enclosed space. So honestly, I didn't know what to expect. There was a track that y'all played. What is it called?
Hollow?
Hollow?
Björk. Yeah.
I'm gonna put it down in the description. I want you to test this in your room. And if it doesn't make you smile like a schoolgirl and get all giddy and excited, I'm gonna tell you right now, your system sucks. Because these 10s rocked my stinking world. I want to say something. I don't even know what to say. It's one of those experiences like,
It's great.
what the heck? I looked over at Tim and I was like, where did that come from? I would have swore the middle one was powering, Doesn't even have an amplifier in
Not
it, right?
even- no
Yeah, it's
amplifier.
like literally not even hooked up, but oh my goodness. But not just output. And I think we kind of made that really, really clear. Perlisten's desire isn't to make the loudest speaker. It can get loud, no problem there. But man, the fidelity that I heard in this. And so we started off really soft and kind of subtle. I don't think y'all do that on purpose. Like, all right, we're going to ease into this thing, and then we're going to. But we just played some really just soft stuff and a lot of detail, a lot of transients there. And I was like, all right, I like this. This is good. And then, but once we started getting a little bit higher volume, and again, we weren't cranking it by any means, but we got a little bit higher volume, and I'm like, oh man, I like this. And then we played like a drum track. What was that called?
Improvisation.
Improvisation. So that had so many little intricacies. I mean, just, and then you got this, all these different, oh my goodness, man. Super, super incredible. You did a real good job at designing those. You did.
Good job, Gus. I love that track, the improvisation, because it's so tough on a subwoofer and it's so tough on a speaker because there's the initial fundamental, if you will, and then the harmonics, and both the sub and the speaker have to agree.
Gotcha.
And you'll pick it out right away if it doesn't. And in this system, I think you agree, the subs more or less disappeared.
No,
and you
you
just
don't
saw
know where they're
a
at.
guy playing the drums in front of you.
Oh, I
Love-
just closed my
love that track.
eyes and I just kind of like just melted away. It was really incredible. Vocals on these are fantastic. Man, I mean, I'll be honest, man, just incredibly, incredibly well designed
Thank you.
speakers and subwoofers. I've heard a lot of speakers, I really have, and there's a lot of great companies out there, there's no doubt. But I can absolutely assure you, those certifications on the wall They deserve them. 100%.
Thanks.
There's no
Culmination
doubt in
of
my
a lot
mind.
of work.
No doubt in my mind. I mean, man, super, super, super impressive. So one thing we didn't talk about, we'll talk about this real quickly. What's in your rack? Because I know you guys like what's in the rack over there. So tell us a little bit about what you've got going on.
So the rack is always a little bit of a revolving door because we're always kind of experimenting and we want to make sure we try a lot of different products with our speakers. But right now, for the main system, we're using Roon. We've got a combination of stuff on the Rock hard drive, or we stream off of Qobuz,
Yeah.
Tidal, you name it.
Sure.
We use Orlick Aries,
Okay.
G2, I think it is. So nice quality streamer, and then the comparable DAC, the Vega DAC. Okay, very nice parts. They integrate flawlessly with Roon. That's one of the reasons we like them. Very clean. Then they're playing into a pair of Mac MC601 monoblocks.
Yeah.
And that, the most part, we use those quite often. Every now and then we'll swap in a PS Audio BHK reference preamp.
Okay.
So it's got the tubes.
Right.
So it changes the sound a little bit.
Sure.
And it gives us a different look at how our products are going to integrate with different type of products. Also another great sounding product. And then we also have several Parasound amplifiers over the years.
Sure.
Parasound has always proven itself as
Absolutely.
a great value for the money, and there's a lot of opportunities that we're going to be matched with any one of those products. So being able to listen to our speakers through those gives us a good range of expectations.
Yeah.
And each one's subtly different. So yeah,
Sure.
so that's the rack today.
So one thing that, all right, there's so many speaker brands out there. I mean, we've got tons of speaker brands, from budget to really uber expensive, high end, from all different walks of life and everything, and preferences. What made you want to create a speaker brand? Because really, Perlisten's pretty new. It hasn't been out for decades.
Nope.
And what in the world compelled you to want to jump into this space and design a speaker and a brand of this caliber?
Yeah, I don't know. Actually, just kidding. You know, audiophile is a DNA thing. You know, once you get hooked, you're the same way as I am. I can tell just by talking with you. Once you get into audio, that's your obsession.
Yeah.
It's not just a career. And so all of us, all the guys in Perlisten have been audiophiles since they were teenagers. And so it's just the next project, the next challenge, the next opportunity. And what was great, certainly the last 15 years or so, I've had the opportunity of not only working with great engineers, but having really diverse projects. And by doing that, you're stretching yourself each time to do something new, different, come up with something intelligent yet again that can sell. And so what was clear to us, we all had the itch to do our own signature, if you will, and create our own branding and just kind of reinvent how we design the audio products from the ground up, and just no limits. Let's look at, you know, we talked about the DPC Array a lot. Well, let's just look at how we're interacting with the drivers and the room, and look at it that way, and just rewrite the book. And so that kind of developed into all these different products. You know, once you had the idea, we just kept going with it. And, you know, that's our passion. And I hope it shows in the products.
Yeah, for sure. Dan, this has literally been an absolutely incredible experience. Super grateful that I had this opportunity to come up here and to demo and to hear firsthand. Where can somebody hear these? Do you have dealers? Are you just USA? Is it global? Kind of tell us about that.
Yeah, so actually that's great. We've had just the last year has just been a whirlwind. You know, we're only a year old.
Yeah.
And in that year, we've gone from showing the product at the Shanghai AV show.
Okay.
In, what was it, October of 2020, right? And so we're just a little over a year beyond that. And initially our launch was just going to be United States and Asia. And what we found was the interest was so good that we're at 28 countries now.
Wow.
And growing. But to your point, where can people get them? The way we work with distributors in each country. The distributors are the specialists, and they find the dealers, the local audio shops, the local installers,
Sure.
the local places, stores that you can actually listen. In fact, a wonderful partner in Taiwan just built a 2-floor dedicated Perlisten store.
Right.
Nothing but Perlisten. Just so excited about that. But we're seeing that everywhere.
Sure.
So and every month we're adding dealers in the U.S. I think we're probably up to about 15 dealers in
Okay.
the U.S.
Fantastic.
So most of the major cities we've got dealers.
Right.
And so really the best way to find out now, because it's changing so quickly, is either to go to our website where we are posting that information, or our USA distributor, Fidelity Imports.
Gotcha. Very cool. Well, Dan, is there anything else that maybe we didn't cover in this video? I know it's been a long video, but I hope you guys are finding value in this. Just understanding who Perlisten is, why it came about, what really went into the design, as well as the technology behind the different components and the architecture. Is there anything else we missed?
I don't think there's anything we missed. I think it's time to turn the music back on and start listening again. What do
I
you
think that would be awesome. Well, guys, I hope you have an incredible week. Stay tuned, because we're actually going to be doing a home theater tour of a complete Perlisten setup. And so if that video is available, you'll see a link right over here that you can check out. Well, God bless, and we'll catch you in the next video.